Friday morning at like 8, and we were back here by 8 on Saturday.
Is there snow there already?
It snowed when we were there,
Okay.
but no, it was some hot days, some cold
Did
days.
you get any, did you get anything?
Yeah. It was bird hunting.
Oh, okay. When I saw on the way here, this is crazy. It was a 95 and right on the Madison border. I swear it was a moose yearling hit
There was one hit a long time ago. There was a full-size
You talked
moose.
about
that
this morning?
this morning coming in.
Couldn't
Wouldn't
be looked at.
surprise me because they, they go out on walkabout. They're highly migratory at some periods of time.
Oh, it was unbelievable. How I knew it was, first of all, the coat, dark brown. And I could see a big ear
Yeah,
because they have those big ears.
That'd be
Nothing else
interesting.
has ears like that.
Well,
I'm
it'll
good
be
with
on the
what-
news if that's what happened.
Yeah, I know, it was on, and it was a big pile, but it wasn't a full grown moose. That would have been unbelievable. It was definitely like either half or a yearling, but it was, I would say yearling because it was dark. Didn't expect to see that. I have
So-
bears all the time up in Northwest, and
Bears,
I'm in
yeah.
a subdivision.
there was one hit we saw in New Jersey on the way home.
It's crazy. There's so many in the
You
Northwest.
gotta get it okay, Gabe. Oh,
I'm not the
You got it.
guy to be
You got it
driving
from
this. All right, and so if anybody wants coffee, there's coffee and donuts and that in the break room, the bathrooms are over there. And I haven't heard back from Mark, but we got pretty much everybody else, so,
you live right down your Wi-Fi.
we got it. It's above my pay grade.
That's the emails, yeah, the spell checker got a hold of it.
You guys are all good to start, by the way, if you guys, when you guys want
Okay,
to.
great.
We're just waiting, someone just walked in the door here, we're just waiting for her to get in the room. Hello.
Good morning.
Hi.
It's underway. Oh, this is you.
Let's get him up here. Come over here.
Yeah. Oh. It's already live here, so. Say hi.
All right, we ready? You guys want to start?
Yeah, how far away is she?
She was a few minutes when she got stuck in Middletown.
Oh.
So,
So
Who's coming?
Alicia.
Ms. Faga joining us here.
I didn't hear from her. There's a
The problem
sign.
is we have that sign over at Crad. Hey Greg, can you hear us?
Hey Greg, you there? I mean, the sign, it's a minute difference.
Yeah, no, I went there first
Did
and
you?
there was a sign, so they sent me over here.
Oh, good.
So, okay, as long as somebody's here.
Yeah, they do know. Then.
You didn't get my text.
No, I didn't. I'm sorry, I was driving.
Yeah, I actually saw it when I was like just a few minutes away, so.
Yeah. You guys want to start? All right, well, thank you all for coming. We appreciate everyone making the effort to get together this morning with the goal of helping Connecticut keep housing as affordable as possible, but still being protective of health and the environment. Sorry about the last minute location change. Unfortunately, the CRAD Zoom went down, so we pivoted as quickly as we could. Before we get started, I would like to reiterate the task that we've been assigned to keep on point. Throughout our past meetings, we heard from certain individuals about their individual goals. This is not why we're here. We're here to get together as a group of experts, each in our own field, to work towards our common goal. Our task is to advise the legislature on the most cost-effective approach to manage the health and environmental impacts of nitrogen for housing projects in Connecticut. While all solutions towards this goal are on the table, we need to first start with really what Matt had proposed and work forward from there. So I think our goal this morning is to consider Matt's approach And then some alternatives to that. And once we get through that, perhaps we'll consider some other considerations, you know, it could be anything. But we need to maintain some focus to get this started. Does anybody have any questions on that?
So,
All right, so you want to kick, Matt, how did you want, should we go through Matt's approach? I mean,
Yeah.
just generally speaking.
Yeah, let's go
I
through.
don't think we need to go at this point through the absolute details unless it's,
Sure.
you feel it's.
Oh, I'll walk you guys through it. So, obviously, you guys realize that I have to take into consideration both sides of the issue, meaning that, you know, I understand development, but on the other hand, I gotta make sure protect public health. So we have to look at both sides. So what we did, is number one, is we all realized that historically deep, starting at 5,000 to anything beyond that, was regulated under them historically and had some type of nitrogen requirements. So that was the baseline that we're dealing with. Obviously, back in 2014, I think it was, that we got up to 7,500. And at that time, we really didn't change anything. So when we acquired those deep systems, nothing was done. There was no additional requirements. Nothing was done. As we all know now, we're going to go up to 10,000. And now essentially that's doubling. So we had two options here. We could say, well, we could say we're going to leave up to 7,500 as is. And just since that's already been established as not requiring any nitrogen requirements, and then just go from 75 to 10, recognizing that deep historically has regulated some type of nitrogen requirements for that. Or we could, you know, go down from the 5 and 1. So our original proposal, I believe, is at the 5. So it's from 5 to 10 where this would go in. So then we wanted to look at, we understood that certain areas are of more of a concern when nitrogen is evaluated than others. So we came up with essentially two areas of concern. Number one, the coastal one. I think everyone can agree on that. And that's easy because first of all, it's closer to the sound clearly. And then the soil conditions being sand basically don't offer very little renovation potential for nitrogen. So that was the low hanging fruit. So within that realm, we had to come up with some type of simplistic means of saying, well, what areas are coastal? And so we came up with this, maybe you can help me with this. What was that coastal? Is this like a coastal boundary? No, it was like,
Yeah, mapping, coastal area.
yeah, coastal area management mapping that basically draws a line over it. I wasn't as familiar with that. Anyhow, we came up with that. So there was no, because right now in our code, we do define coastal areas, or we mention coastal areas, but it's very ambiguous. Like, what is a coastal area? Like, how far from the coast? And that's led to a lot of issues when we're dealing with properties. So this sort of takes that ambiguity out of it. So I kind of liked that. All right. So that was focus number one. Focus area number one was coastal areas. Now the other thing was the rest of the state. What would be areas that we might consider of concern? And what it was, the way, and again, be mindful of some sort of mechanism that was a universal, that could be easily understood, that there was no discrepancies, you can understand it, so delineated. So we went with the wetlands boundaries, which are done town by town. And we said, well, and I want to be clear on this, I don't know if everybody got this, but we only said that, so if you have a parcel you want to develop and it has these wetlands areas in it, however, if you develop areas on the property, and when I mean develop, I mean put a sewage disposal system on there, as long as it's outside of that regulated area, even though it is on the property, you're not going to have to go through the detailed nitrogen evaluation. So and honestly though, I would think that most of the time that's happening anyway, as a developer, because you don't want to deal with wetlands people, especially on new developments. That is something. So we felt that was pretty reasonable. That seemed pretty logical. And again, it was specific where the system goes. So it would encourage them to not put the system too close to the wetlands. Now, the other objective of this, and this is something that I think I touched upon last time, is everyone has to understand here, and Sonia and I have been through this already, is if we don't do that, so it's even, you might say, well, okay, it's debatable whether nitrogen's an issue here. I get that. But the people on the other side, specifically the wetlands folks and others, if we don't act on that, they will. So I felt that by having some sort of at least recognition that nitrogen, and in certain situations, we have to have it evaluated in those cases, better to have it under our jurisdiction, where we have control through the technical standards and our code advisory board, which does consist of home builders and everybody else, that we can tweak that when necessary. So that was just some of the objectives here.
But we've thought that for a long time, that it doesn't make sense to have you regulate things, review and approve, but then have it bounce back to the municipal commissions, who I've literally sat through thousands of those meetings. Am I lying, Sonia?
No.
Literally. And you know, it's a rehash of what we've already talked about. Why don't we talk about the building code? You know, we can understand something like a road where there isn't a Matt sitting up in Hartford, looking at it, reviewing it, comparing it to standards and saying this is approved. A road goes, gets sent to the town engineer. He looks at it. It's his opinion. It's okay. So the commission accepts that or doesn't.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make sense to us to say, hey, here's a new design. And the other one are the repairs, right?
Yes.
And the repairs were a real problem
Mm.
because we get something, right? Many times it's our best effort. We fit everything we can, but then the local commission says, oh, no. So that's a consideration too, that
And just, scientifically, the interesting thing is if you look at some of the studies like Art Gold did over at URI and wetlands and nitrogen.
Yeah.
What you find, there's an argument that you might want to cite your septic system.
Yeah, I don't
here, but
disagree with that.
you can see in our,
It's not taking nitrogen.
Yeah.
And that's recognized in the state statute, that's where water is purified. They knew that when they wrote the statute 50 years ago.
well, you can literally see in Art's work, the nitrogen head towards the wetland, gets down gradient in the wetland, it's removed. So, I mean,
Yeah, I don't disagree, but I'm telling you the reality of
Oh, yeah.
is that
Oh, yeah.
the other side is not going to see it that way.
but hopefully we can look at this is what we talked about, science, right?
Yeah.
We need to swing this back. If we want to help Connecticut make housing more affordable and be protective of the environment,
Yeah.
we need to look at the science, right? The
Yeah.
facts and the science of how we solve this problem.
I'm okay with that. So let me just go into a little more
Yep.
detail though, that the areas of concern, I want to be clear on this. We just basically said that you're going to go to the DEP design manual and you're going to implement their current nitrogen procedures verbatim. We didn't want to change that in
Yep.
any way. We figured leave well enough alone. Everybody else then, it's even outside areas of concern. If you're over the threshold of, well, we went for 5,000, but if ends up where it's 7,500 to 10,000, we said you can implement the simplistic formula then, which is very, very generous. I think we did some numbers about how many bedrooms per acre. And now that we've dropped for multifamily, we've dropped the gallonage.
Mhm.
I mean, that's gotten significant now. It's almost like you couldn't, you probably 99% of the time going to get what you want when you're using the simplistic formula, unless you're literally on a postage stamp lot. And then we'd be like, probably you're going to have issues. So let's look at that. So that was in a nutshell our approach with this. And then we'll see what Stu had come up with. I mean, I'm definitely understanding or be willing to consider anything. And I think one of Stu's main issues was the parsing up of the lots, which clearly, that's been a long-standing issue. And yeah, if this can overcome that, then sure. But I need to understand this better because I'm not getting it from what I read. But so that's a nutshell what our approach was with this.
Can I just say one thing about the
Sure.
sensitive properties? So one of several of the communities I worked in, some of them also lakefront properties. and properties that have wells and septic that are really close, because we are worried about the nitrogen in private wells. So I have quite a few properties in areas, and I'm sure other places do as well, that have wells in all over the place, wells and septic, and it's very difficult on those properties. Now, a lot of them isn't gonna be developed land, but a lot of them can be done as reuse, tear down, rebuild, tear down, rebuild. You can add property. So I just want to make sure that we are kind of careful on that end. It's not just coastal in these areas.
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, one other
Well,
thing. Okay.
Bill, what I was gonna say in furtherance to that is, we've actually, or myself and others have discussed, the idea of using the CAM map previously. If you're gonna do that, and there are modifications, then maybe taking the CAM map, but it's gotta be on GIS, I would assume, at deep, right? Somebody's got.
Somebody's got that, yeah, I hope.
That could be modified if there are places, sensitive, for towns to say, here's a sensitive area. I think a good case in point, Dave has a lot of experience with that Mass Test Center, and some of the problems, many of the problems that they have on Cape Cod are on the little kettle ponds, where they act as a sink and the nitrogen gets in the sink. But what goes
There,
out,
it's a phosphorus
Yeah,
problem
but
in the
then-
pond itself, and
but then-
the differentiator in Cape Cod versus, I'm gonna say Guilford, is Cape Cod is all shallow based aquifer, right? And we're dealing predominantly with deep wells that are not connected to the aquifer whatsoever.
So I did it.
Well, in some areas, but I mean, I think if we're gonna look at the cost of housing, we don't want to broad brush and say universally, we can't do, an environmentally sensitive area is around those lakes in Guilford, right? If you got all deep rock wells, why make those people have a 10 times more expensive septic system if their well is at 400 feet in a confined aquifer, picking up its water from Salisbury?
Yeah.
Right, it's going hard and left.
I realize that, using a CAM map is regulatorily expedient, right? It's helpful, and maybe though there could be too much of a broad brush, right? So rather than
Those
a
gotta
map,
be
shouldn't we just come up with a formula for what is an environmentally sensitive area for nitrogen?
Yeah, I
Right.
mean, could it be a preponderance? I don't know the value, but a preponderance of shallow wells or the inability to put in a deeper well? Because it'd be cheaper to put in a deeper well in some of these places if phosphorus is the issue in these lakes. If we could force them, if you're gonna do an upgrade, you need to put a deeper well in and upgrade your septic. But do we force them to remove I don't know. I asked the question.
Well, the well thing though is we are not allowed to put a well within 7 feet of the system.
Yeah.
So when we do that, that's gonna, some of these properties are on the lakes, that's a lakefront property, just like coastal, postage stamp lots, small wells. So we can get a well variance for a septic system being too close to a well, but we can't have a well too close to a septic. I think a lot of these areas would actually benefit from public water if they can,
Yeah.
it's achievable. But not every area is gonna want it. One of the areas I'm referring to voted down the public water line.
Yeah.
So I mean, is there anything to say against that? You voted it down. Do we really want to, worry about the development around there? Because maybe it's a good thing that it's not able to be developed.
Let me ask you guys this.
Agreed.
I don't know,
I came from drinking water. God, it was over 20 years ago. But anyway, I used to work in what they call the non-community program, which was small water systems, and they were all wells. So I saw thousands of data points. I very rarely ever saw a nitrogen contamination that was attributed to a septic system. Seen it from agriculture,
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. Never, and never really tested for phosphorus.
I think probably Cape Cod might have it in some of those tight, we
Yeah.
have a place up there. I
Exactly.
mean, they might have it there.
Oh, and I could believe
And
that.
George could tell us.
Sure, because it's all septic and it's basically a giant sand mound there, so there's no fine result. But my point is, I don't know, is it really a drinking water well problem? I don't know, guys. I'm not.
I don't either.
We felt, I'm glad when I put this together, I
Yeah,
had like 4 or 5 more pages, and I said, I can't.
yeah,
Just send that out.
But so that might
That's one of the
be,
things.
so that's a consideration, right?
yeah.
How do we handle the well side, there's the water, the drinking water side of it?
Yeah,
How do we, I mean, that may fall into this, right?
I'm just thinking it's more of an environmental issue.
Think about it.
Than getting into wells.
Maybe can we get, we'd like to get some data from the DEP. Can we get data from the department? Is there any way that the DPH would have data?
The drinking water section, probably could get us, yeah, they have that data. So these non-community systems have to have certain testing. I think maybe an annual nitrogen test.
Yeah.
And it's all digital now.
Yeah.
So there might be a means of getting that data.
Maybe that's one, what do you guys think?
Sure.
Because if that's we need to know, is it a problem or is it not?
Mhm. No, I agree. And then I think Dave and I had a conversation this morning too, that, just because nitrogen's in something, it doesn't have to be from septics.
Right.
My biggest thing was fertilizer and Candlewood Lake, if any of you folks know Candlewood Lake, that's over in Brookfield, Danbury, I've been out on sites and you see all these lush green lawns, and I've been out there and I've seen the lawn companies go out there and they double up on it because they don't want a customer that's unhappy.
Yeah.
And the guy's using this rotary spreader and it's just going right in the lake.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really?
Well, then that's,
Yeah.
that, I don't know, we should discuss this in probably a little later on, but the essence is we need data to understand, right? So if we could understand the general realm of nitrogen in the state, that would help us put it all into context. So if we could understand, maybe it's just the average removal efficiency of the municipal plants in Connecticut, the worst removing and the best removing. If we could understand the stormwater loads, and if we could understand what else, I guess the AT versus septic, that's an important, I guess, contextual perspective to make these decisions. Maybe we find out that the best thing to do for the lakes in Guilford would be to say no fertilizer. Can we give the town the right, maybe they already have it, to say no fertilizer around these lakes, right? If you want to truly control this problem, you'll do better by that than you would, and that's more cost effective from a development perspective.
Well, that's definitely a Long Island Sound problem. Fertilizer.
Yeah.
And the pesticides, everybody wonders where the lobsters have gone.
Mhm.
You can't have an insect and spray insecticide up on the beach and not expect the insects to die.
That's exactly right. I read that. Just one other thing, and I just lost my train of thought.
Good morning.
Sorry, I'm late.
There's no problem. Steve, I gotta move down.
So, on some of these repairs that we're dealing with on like front doors and middle, so not just dealing with the well, we're also dealing with stormwater systems. If they decide to go underneath the ground, we're dealing with low flow wastewater treatment disposal systems, backwash. So where there's a lot going on some of these smaller properties, which is not only traffic that you guys know, but it's all non-porous pollution. And that's, I don't know if there's any issue, but there are a lot of dug wells around some of these lake areas too. And I'm speaking for Guilford, but in general. So I think it'd be interesting to find out what those rates are of the nitrogen.
Yes, and I just remembered my train of thought. So there's been a couple of studies, which I don't, the Vaudry study, you folks are familiar with, and then is it P.B. Smith? Or one of the Smith, they did a study. for
CDM.
CDM, thank you. And both of them, or at least definitely the Vaudry one, did implicate through formulas and not through actual empirical
Yes.
data, which really drives me crazy because I'd like to see some that septics was the highest contributor.
Well, and that's what happened on Cape Cod. So the Shubal Pond project really was a model, was a part of model calibration.
Mhm.
So there are certain assumptions in these models, it's just numerical models. One of them was septic tank effluent was, I think, 40 milligrams per liter. Well, after the Shubal Pond project, they learned it was more like 80 to 90 milligrams per liter. So effectively, the model said you have to remove, let's just say, 1 million pounds of nitrogen a year. You only had to remove 500,000. And then when you started looking at it, you'd say, we assume septic was coming out at 40. Well, it's removing, septic systems are removing twice as much nitrogen as they thought when they started this study. So they basically took a watershed going into Shubal Pond. USGS came in, they put in wells, and we can have George come and he offered to come and sit with us. But you could see the plume going towards the pond. And then they outfitted quite a few with, the what they call best available nitrogen removal technology. And that was there's only about 2 systems when they did all the analysis of all the systems that are operating in Mass. There are only, I think, 2 systems that actually met the standards that were required consistently. And I forget what the probability of hitting that was.
What year was that?
That's very recent, in the past three years, I'll say.
Was the standard the drinking water?
Their standard's 19, and no one, I shouldn't say no one.
Yeah.
Very few could achieve 19.
Wow.
There are a few that are achieving 10 and single digit numbers. So ultimately, this study really helped calibrate the entire models, the assumptions of the models for Cape Cod. And that's what we don't have here. So we need to do it. And, some of the data I saw and asked questions, I don't think I got answers. You could have a sewer line running and there were septics in the area. And the assumption was the septic did it, not the sewer leaked. I mean, you got to know, you have to understand all that if we're going to really make, progress here. So, but we should understand if there's modeling or something like that based on Connecticut, we need to understand that.
Has there been an evolution in the technology in the past 3 years?
There are a few. So now, because, and this is data driven, right? The Cape Cod, the test center came up with software that all systems get plugged into, and they look at the performance. You could just type in whatever technology you want and see how it works, right? On all the sites, on specific sites, anything you want. But the long and the short of it is, there's really just a few that can achieve 10 milligrams per liter consistently. Maybe 2. I think they expanded the list because there's only 1 or 2 that can do it. That wasn't politically correct, right? They needed to have more. So they made compromises and they allowed others that didn't hit the numbers so well. So these are all the things that happen.
David, I got a question. Is that 19 just coming from the system or 19 collectively the whole top?
19 off the discharge.
And I think not in the discharge wasteline, right? So I think that's also where we're talking about 2 different things here, 10 milligrams per deciliter at the property line versus 19 at the system. I've gone to Suffolk County, I only looked at the program and a lot of them are 19, 18, 19, talking about per system. And for us in the shoreline that have tons of AT systems in our wastewater facility plants, knowing that number is probably more beneficial than an actual large swath of land that need to be developed, because most of them aren't that big anymore. So that's kind of why I'm here, is learning about that, and that's why I was asking a question if that was 19, because I think you're right, 10 from a system.
You can see the data. I mean, and if you're going to put them in, ultimately the question is, what is the cost in pounds removed, right, per dollar, right? I mean, this is what we're talking about. That's why we're here. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
Clear the difference.
Well, one other thing I want to mention that we did put in there as well, and again, this was trying to be as friendly or not as intrusive as we had to be with B100A activities. So we did, so B100A, just for everybody's understanding, is pretty much anytime you do any activity on a property that has a sewage disposal system, we want to make sure that that activity doesn't have an adverse effect on our ability of the existing system or our ability to have a repair system in the future. So that's just the most simplistic explanation. So bottom line here, the only activity that we felt that we were going to at least go after when it came to nitrogen was actually increasing the flows. That makes sense, right? So the more you discharge, the more potential for nitrogen. So if you had a property that was in basically, let's say, more than 5,000, which says you have to have a nitrogen evaluation. If you wanted to increase the flow, so how we were going to do this is where we were going to get a lot of existing facilities, right? So if you're existing and you don't meet the standard, you can stay that way. You're sort of grandfathered in. In other words, don't meet the nitrogen standard. However, you would be locked in at a certain gallonage. The only good thing is eventually we're going to get AT, and then you would be able to presumably overcome that potentially by putting AT on, in which case then you could get maybe possibly more flows. But as it stands right now, that's what we were going to do. So However, though, if you really think about it, some of the B100A activities do have an impact on nitrogen, and we didn't really get into that. I'll give you an example. So the dilution factor is the big thing with the nitrogen for us. So if you put a property and you put a bunch of buildings on there or pave over or do things like that, clearly you're reducing the amount of impervious areas and therefore potentially causing the nitrogen concentration to get higher. So we didn't go there with that.
Mhm.
We said, let's just stick with low increase, more nitrogen generated, then we're gonna have to look at it. You're grandfathered in. So if we inherit a system that's 10,000 gallons from deep, and well, actually deep, it should have met the standard, one would think, but let's say, well, that's not always the case, but anyway, some of our systems now, let's say from 5 to 7,500, definitely did not have any regulation that we've approved in the last 10 years. Those did not have any nitrogen evaluations done on them. If they came now and said we want to expand the flows, they're gonna have to go through these nitrogen. And anyone could understand that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Couldn't you could still have, or is it not possible anymore, where you had a historic site that's over 10,000 a day that hasn't really peaked above the radar? Is that?
Oh, so conceivably, yeah, perhaps. In other words, it hasn't been regulated by deep.
It hasn't had a problem yet. It hasn't had a problem in the
Yeah.
past, what,
They
10,
would be
15
locked in.
years?
They would be locked in, essentially, and at that. And then if they want to move forward and expand, they would have to show that they can do it. And I think the thing that worried me was that we didn't have a means of overcoming that from a developer's perspective. So we will eventually, which is AT. Because I didn't want to lock a property in forever on something.
Yeah.
But when you get AT, you should presumably have that ability to do that.
Yeah, and we never, I guess, got back around to the options of, say, the wood-based systems or soil air that were historically DEP.
Yeah,
And
if you want
DEH.
me to talk about that for a second. Now, this is what, and we did get into this in one of our meetings, was that we were told that as soon as any of these technologies that we have, soil, air, and our passive nitrogen system, as soon as we start assigning numbers to reduction of certain things, parameters, then that sum becomes AT.
But the DEP already did it and the Department of Health has done it. So the definition of AT is what it is, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's be clear. The definition of alternative treatment versus advanced treatment. You know, around the country, advanced treatment is deemed something that's get a higher level of treatment. Is it secondary? Is it into nitrogen? Probably. The definition of alternative in Connecticut is, I'll paraphrase, where treatment occurs somewhere other than a septic tank and a leach field.
Okay.
Paraphrasing. So, you know, we're always throwing those around, but right now we could work on a DEP site or a DPH site and get a credit for nitrogen out of soil air. I know, I'll use that, and I don't.
Well, we can't give you a credit though, but we're not enforcing nitrogen, so why would you do it? I mean, you
Yeah.
have no incentive.
But if you start, that was our point. If you're,
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking, Dave, that it's almost gonna be a moot point, because I don't see the DAT, acquisition AT with DPH is that far off. You're right, there's probably gonna be this 5-year window
Yeah.
where there's gonna be that potential.
or it's, I don't want this to be, it's not about me,
Yeah.
but effectively it's a take, right? If you can use a wood blend system today in the state and get credit for it from a DEP on a 9,000 gallon a day site,
Mhm.
if you say you can't do that anymore, that's a taking. I mean,
Well,
that'll be-
I'm not saying we can't do it, but at least historically, it's been, if, again, a number is assigned to its removal efficiency, but if they want to change their mind on it.
The DEP already did it, right? So
Yeah.
we
No,
just
but-
assume the DEP values.
But no, it's not that, Dave. It's that, they have eight, they can enforce AT under their.
But these aren't AT.
Would
So-
would it be helpful to just be one of our recommendations to clarify what is AT and what is?
I mean, today it's crystal clear. There's letters written
Yeah,
from the DEP and the
but maybe
department.
that letter needs to be codified.
Yeah, I think we make that. What I'm pointing out is you're actually going to require nitrogen removal and you're taking away options that are present today.
Well, they have to make a decision Because that's who we went to when soil air came
Yes.
on board, and when the nitrogen came on board, was that, you know, we were told at that time, if things have changed, they've changed, but that as soon as you assign these removal efficiencies, then it becomes AT. You know, put it on.
Who was they?
That was deep at the time, deep.
Who had,
Oh, true. Well, it was.
what I'm saying, is this an upper level thing or just the?
Well, this was.
In other words, there's dogma that's been around for the last 45 years, you know?
Sure.
You know, like Dave said, there's a lot of confusion over what constitutes AT. You know, what happened with him, what was that, 20 years ago?
But 20 years ago, I mean, it was a commissioner level decision.
Yeah.
I can tell you that. And they assigned, the DEP assigned that value.
So the point is when everybody says, well, if you do this, that, it's important to know who and what the basis was for that. In other words, we're sitting here saying, you know, what's the basis for the regulation? That's what I'm asking is.
Well, that's.
And I'm not
Yeah.
questioning you. It's not like I'm
No, I'm
picking on you. I'm just saying I'm trying to get a handle on where this is coming from and whether there's a factual basis for saying that.
Yeah, no,
Is there
I.
a statute or
I'm
is there?
open to
It
any.
seems to me like there's some regulatory vagary right here, right?
Yeah.
So like, I mean, it might be prudent to really think about, you know, whether or not this is, the definition is found in the next iteration of the AT regs, or
You redefine it.
or we
And
redefine it.
where does this stuff, I can't say that I'm familiar with this, the break point in the definitions between the regulations and the statutes. In other words, what did the statutes say and where does this start? Where did AT first come up? Where's it first mentioned? I'm guessing regulations, but
My guess is that the statute allows the deep to define it, and then deep in regulation defines it. That's my assumption.
Yeah, that would, again, that's a little over my head, but I think deep, historically, since it was under their purview, they would be the one to go to answer those questions. I will just tell you, my experience in the past was, we would go to them, like, we had a lakefront community and they wanted to put a passive, a tank with, they wanted to remove, in this case, phosphorus, and they said, no, you can't do that. Like,
That's AT.
yeah,
Yeah. If it doesn't occur, I mean, it's cut and dry if you read it. If it has to occur in a septic tank or subsurface sewage disposal system.
Yeah.
If you add another tank, that's not a septic tank and it's not a subsurface. That's.
yeah. So your argument is that the technologies you mentioned previously are in the subsurface.
They are occurring there.
And
That's why they were.
yeah. So listen, again, if they want to, if the higher ups want to change that, then so be it. And if you want somebody to look at that again.
I mean, I think it's already, it's crystal clear. If you look at, if you look at the language, it's already there. That's how, I mean, there was a pretty big effort to allow these things.
My only
When they did.
concern is that, you know, there's a lot of AT people out there. Again, I'm just thinking what's going to happen with this, that are chomping at the bit to get into Connecticut.
Well, we need to write the
Yeah.
rules to allow it.
Yeah,
Right?
no, I don't disagree with that. So yeah, I think there's gonna be this 5-year window for this issue. I think this issue.
That's all it is.
Can I just put this into context?
Yeah.
So, you're talking about jurisdiction shift, right? I mean, we don't seem to have a clear path from where we're going from DPH, DEP, and the systems we got from DEP. They come back to us in DPH. Now we're gonna be doing that nitrogen calculation. What's to be expected out of that? You know, we don't have a clear path anyway right now.
You already have the systems out there, right? There's already systems. I know my stuff. So, you know, with soil air systems running today that are getting a credit for nitrogen removal, they come over to you. Right? I mean, it's there.
Well, I mean, we've never approved them based off of their nitrogen.
No, but the DEP has.
Oh, the deep has,
Right?
okay.
So it's coming to you. You're getting
Yeah,
this.
they have jurisdiction with AT. I think that was the understanding. So that's
It is
why they
not, it's
approved it for that.
very clearly, I can show you the letter. It's very clearly written that it is not AT.
Yeah,
So it's coming back to you.
yeah,
You can't say, well, we're not gonna deal with that because you're being given it.
yeah.
Give them a choice.
Your letter is not like a deep bulletin, right?
It's a letter.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. It's a deep
What
letter.
letter is this?
Oh, it's a letter 20 years ago, I would think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That basically said soil air's not AT, not alternative treatment as defined by the state of Connecticut.
And signed it, you know, an additional, was it additional 20% after the
20%.
septic tank and leach field? They still were using, and they still are, the model of 20%, you know, in the tank, 20% in the leach field, and then with the soil air, it was another 20%.
They reviewed all the data, and Antonella is the one who did it with Warren.
Maybe we provide that letter to Peter to have it posted.
We could.
Now, did DEP assign something during the the big products as well? Because I know for us in Westbrook, we had to have DEP and DPH. I don't remember.
Yes.
Had to come into the room to discuss it, but we only wanted to get into DPH as well, so we could actually repair some systems. But it never was assigned in nitrogen credit. I don't know if DEP has.
We did the two, and we did one at the Saybrook Dog Pound, and we did the one at the community bathroom down at Sabre Point.
Did they tell you what nitrogen they want?
I think we,
Well, which
this is going back again. This is probably 10, 15 years ago. I mean, this was a long time, time before anybody even knew what it was. We were trying. So Bob did it.
Yeah, so I think the
Those in the
moral
file.
story is if you want somebody, it definitely is not a decision I can make.
Understood.
But if somebody to reconsider that, sure. And I think it's been brought up in other meetings, I know,
Yeah,
sure.
Let's just clarify it, right? We need to know, especially because I mean, it's not what happens going forward on a new project. The projects that are already done will flow to you and you're dealing with it.
And there's a substantially similar argument to be made about naturally occurring soils as well, right? I mean, that's something that's allowed currently under deep. But we're not seeing that same allowance under DPH, right?
Oh, okay, so let's talk. So you're saying that we only allow naturally occurring soil, whereas they don't.
Right.
The only thing there is, and I say this, what you guys don't want is a prescriptive code is what we have. So there's advantages and disadvantages to a prescriptive code. The advantages are you get timelier reviews. It's clear cut, either it works or it doesn't. Now, DEEP has a non-prescriptive code, which is great in a sense where you can pretty much do anything to a site and get it to comply because you have infinite amounts of tools in your tool chest. But the downside to that is it requires a lot more review time because it's a site specific. And so you can't, I don't think you really can have both.
You do in other states though. I mean, in all fairness, they would say, I believe we're the only state that says you can't bring material in to get water table separation. Right, in all other states I work
When you're
in,
saying where water table is not at least 18 or 24
Yes.
inches below.
We
grade
bring in
existing soil.
an approved material, which is specified very clearly, it's called C33 or select fill of a certain state standard.
Mhm.
And you need to apply that on top before you start building. Very prescriptive.
Okay.
But you're saying that takes what would be considered an unsuitable site here and turns it into a suitable site.
Yes.
So I just have two first. So like, if you have like 30 acres and you're talking about hard pan, what is the environmental risk? So I get it, not having 18 inches of naturally occurring native site soil by, natural, right? I don't see where that's much of an issue as if you go on the shoreline again, and you only have 18 to 24 inches, you're putting a lot of flow in there and you're also worrying about flooding. I mean, I think those are like, in my opinion, a natural or an area that's sensitive versus an area that's all over Connecticut.
But
Is a hard pan gonna be that big of an issue? I don't know.
Look, the soils in Connecticut, I work, I won't say everywhere in the country, but across the country. Soils that we say are terrible here are the very best you've ever seen if you go down to Georgia.
Yeah.
I'm definitely, yep.
So this is all stuff that can be prescriptively dealt with. And if the issue is water table separation, that can be dealt with by adding more material to get that separation. If the issue is flooding, well, there's a prescribed height that would have to be above, right? You'd have another standard that says, sure, from a wastewater perspective, this is it. But from a flooding perspective, it needs to be at elevation, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all achievable.
And then at the end of the day, the question is allowing for non-naturally occurring soils. Is it a detriment to the environment? And if not, is it a positive impact to development in the state of Connecticut? Right. So you have to weigh that, you have to balance.
How many sites are there?
Well, can I get into that though? I mean, that's a fundamental paradigm shift of that our code was, that's the foundation. So that would have a huge impact. I think, honestly, I wouldn't want to go there for this. I understand we want to look at everything from a higher perspective, but I think that right now is way too big of an issue to go into. That changes everything. There are probably hundreds or even thousands of properties that now all of a sudden would become developable that, you know, and it just would change a lot of things.
But those are issues, you know, from our perspective, our task is what can we do that doesn't hurt the environment or health from a nitrogen perspective,
Mhm.
but is beneficial from a cost perspective and development,
No, I got you.
right?
So making them developable. Right?
I know, I'm not saying it's a bad thing,
Yeah.
but it's just, it's gonna cause a lot of, it's a big
Yeah,
deal.
well,
It's a really big
Well, you're
deal.
right. The dogma's difficult to overcome
Yeah,
and but this might be the time. I mean, you know, I think for the last, ever since I've been doing this, you know, unfortunately, the regulations were generally written to severely constrain development. And it wasn't just from a public health perspective. We all know the politics behind it were really stop.
definitely politics.
Now there's this recognition, there aren't enough houses.
Mhm.
And, you know, there are those who would say that if things loosen up, oh my God, there'll be all these houses everywhere. Well, supply and demand is going to constrain that. You know, and one of the ways that cost can be controlled is as soon as supply catches up with demand, that's going to slow prices down too. It's hard. You know, governments have been trying forever, right, to constrain costs. They've been trying to say thou shalt not charge more than this. And that doesn't work. Not in a free market economy. And so
Down to a non-engineer level for a second. Give me an example of somewhere where the bringing in the non-native soils, it seems like this is what we're talking about here, right?
So let's just,
Let's just finish framing this for a second. Give me an example where there might be something that's not developing, you could bring the soils in, there is no environmental impact. And give me the other scenario. I want to understand both scenarios here to fully understand what we're talking about here.
well, I think one would be somebody went into a site and pushed all the material off and you're left with ledge. Is that fair?
that's one, yeah.
Right? So somebody went in Salisbury, Connecticut,
Okay.
and I don't know, for whatever reason, they completely pushed off all the material. Maybe they were taking the good sand and gravel out of there.
Okay.
Maybe they were doing mining, who knows what it is.
Okay.
And that's no longer developable. It's perfect. It's a perfect spot from every respect, all right?
Mhm.
All we have to do is get trucks and bring the sand and gravel back on there. And there's no effect whatsoever on the environment relative to what it had been prior. There's an argument that if you bring in a C33 sand, it's got superior treatment qualities that would make it better. All right, that's option A. Option B would be go down to the beach here and waves were washing sand up onto something that you didn't have enough sand there. Well, I guess it doesn't matter whether waves bring it in there or whether a truck brings it in there. Is that fair?
Well, no, naturally occurring, and here's the interesting part. If there was some, like a levee that was built or something, that then the storm came in and because of that levee was there, then now the sand was deposited,
Yeah.
that would be man-made, but if it was a
Yeah.
natural storm.
Yeah, there's a lot of these nuances
Yeah, exactly.
that really
That's
don't,
which is-
that really don't matter from an environmental treatment perspective. But let's just take the beachfront lot. Let me take the worst case scenario. For somehow you could go in there and just start dumping sand on the beach
Mhm.
and build it up and build your septic system there.
Okay.
All right, that would be the worst case.
Well, I think the 5-year legal battle I had a property right across the street. They had junk fill at the bottom. So the sand that was being displaced above it, that's what they wanted to use as your naturally occurring native to the site soils. But would it have actually been up that high if the junk fill wasn't there in the first place? I'm gonna tell you, it was 13 test pits on a property that was about 100 feet by 50 feet across the street from the ocean. It definitely had some issues going back. We thought it would have been a slam dunk. The next thing you know, I'm in a legal battle for 5 years. DPH is awesome. They help you walk through it. So in that kind of scenario, yeah, I do get concerned because of, you can pretty much, during our rain and standing, if you went out there, you'd see sand, sand being pushed by everyone because you're covering up systems. Well, is that natural? Should it be at that elevation? So that would be like, yeah, the most extreme Dave was saying.
Yeah.
And then you have one that's like hardpan, I mean, or sand that would have worked, and you have no wetlands, you have no, nothing on it.
So speaking, just to give an actual example that you can literally go look at. Sonia was still sanitarian in Westbrook when we did the one right where
Yes.
Augie's place was.
I have pictures. Mhm.
For anybody who remembers it, there, in Westbrook on Route 1. Right before you get to Water's Edge heading west, there's a little pond. It used to have a statue of a
No,
it
in the
was
pond.
it was a surrealist, semi-naked lady with no arms and no head and no legs, but clearly posing nude, but about 20 feet tall. She was in the middle of the pond. Well, anyway, there was a guy named Augie who owned it. It was this
Thanks,
old
Bill.
art studio. But the property is wetlands. The only wetlands when we had it flagged is somebody bought it. It was a tax auction. Somebody bought it and said, I want to do something with it. The only wetlands was non-wetlands was the building. So when the soil scientist went out, he went around the foundation of the building and put flags.
Yep.
Everything else inland wetland.
Yeah.
But the way that the regulations were written with, and Bob came down and looked at it. And the regulations said, okay, you're entitled to, put in a septic system as a repair, quote repair, because it's not a change in use. So here we are with a bunch of wetlands. And we've got to get a septic system in here. So we literally stripped out a bunch of the wetlands, which are unsuitable by definition, less than 18 inches of groundwater. The perk rate is basically zero because if you dig a hole in there, you're in the water. You can't make the water run out when it's running in. So unsuitable. Put in 2 to 3 feet of sand fill stretching back about 80 feet, a big long blanket of it, and build a leach field on the, on the upper side of it. And it's what, 6, 7 years now?
That's great.
And it's working great.
When you're walking.
It's
onto
still
the
something I
property-
wouldn't like to see.
No, it's not.
That's an example of something that I.
But see, that's
We lost their wetlands.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
That's absolutely the problem. We in local health, we don't have a choice. If it's a grandfathered inflow, everything in my world is, no. We have Bob actually review the plan. When you're walking out on a property, you're literally the latches, knowing that you have to build on it. That's the way B100A is written,
Okay.
and unfortunately,
But,
yeah. it looks
but
like
see,
now.
these are the tensions that we're dealing with every day of all of the diverse opinions and points of view. But there's the fact of, there's an old joke, and it's a kind of a inside joke for people who deal with septic systems all the time, but there was a kid's book written a long time ago. It says everyone poops. And that's kind of what we have to deal with these septic systems is we've got to find a spot for them. And we also look at properties, and it happens quite a bit. Then if I gave a little thought, I could literally take you to some, I've already thought of a few, but that were either marginally suitable or unsuitable based on these regulations, where there's no wetlands in play. But they're, steep sites with glacial till, thin layers of glacial till. Our favorite is, you have to have 2 feet minimum of naturally occurring soil over bedrock. Okay, that's what the regulation says, 2 feet. And we're getting 18 inches, 20 inches, 21 inches, 22 inches. Oh, unsuitable. When, unsuitable is a regulatory fence post or guide rail, but it's not based in the reality from an engineering perspective or an environmental, it doesn't necessarily follow that there's a negative environmental impact. Every site is different. Every site is evaluated on a case by case basis. That's why you have the prescriptive regulation, but the information that comes in, that is a little bowl of candies right in the middle here. But to be able to get to that, you got to have a bunch of coins that you gather on the way in, and it costs you some money and you put it in there. That's, obviously we do a bunch of soil testing. We do surveys and topographic surveys, identify the wetlands and things. Once those things are done, and absent some obvious glaring deficiency, 2 feet doesn't make, isn't something that makes sense on every site. And it
You were
can be
saying
filled
is
in,
that
and it's been,
states have a balance
and-
in prescriptive and non-prescriptive, so I mean, that more allowable.
well, but the great thing is, it may be possible at some point to come up with a regulation that says maybe you can quantify some conditions, but you have empirical information from other states where soils are, we're even saying, those soils would be unsuitable here, but they're work,
So,
those work, so we know that they can work.
so I feel the tension over here with Matt, right? So
It's all right.
Let me just say this is that, we've been told by the higher ups that it's best that we find consensus. It's best that we work together with state agencies, and find common ground. Obviously to me, it makes a lot of sense that, we don't want to rape our wetlands, but we do want to find sensible solutions for areas like David described, where there might be ledge at higher elevations, where it wouldn't make sense to bring in non-naturally occurring soils. With that all being said, I think that's a conversation that's worth having, worth aspiring to, but given Matt's concerns, that we might want to say, in our final report, that we recommend a working group specifically tasked with identifying, a way forward with this conversation, but not necessarily addressing it right here.
Well, see, I think that's a great point, and we've been thinking, or I've been thinking that for a while, and I think I even say it in this memo. We're short of time and kind of got to focus, hopefully on a few big items that are gonna move things forward. But that's a great idea, maybe, to continue.
So, maybe it's worthwhile if Matt is done talking or describing the regs as he's laid them out, then you, Stu, maybe kind of go over your thoughts and sentiment about.
Sure.
And so do we wanna keep-
This is
this?
Mark Langford.
Greg.
Yeah, Mark, this is Mark, and I'm been listening to all of the what I consider between prescriptive and non-prescriptive ways of doing business. We already have it in the regs. We already have it in the regs for areas of special concern, which if you as an engineer see an opportunity in order to make something work, you can ask for that. And there are guidelines. Maybe some of those guidelines got to be expanded a little bit, but we already have that in the regulations. And I know I've worked on many of sites where there are situations where you have a situation of shallow to bedrock or whatever, and you don't want to take away the rights of that individual being able to develop their property for whatever it is. You can come in with a engineered solution, whether it's adding fill, taking out bedrock, creating the areas in order to make it functionally operate and work long term. So, I think you're really, listen, I'm an engineer. I'm looking to make sure that we get the housing and that sort of thing, but I'm coming from more where I know where Matt's coming from, is that if you start getting into this where you're going to give a lot more flexibility, and I agree, engineering wise, you can do things. We already have it in the code. And it really is alarming to me that the ability to go in on properties to where they're very suspect, but trying to make them work, we're going down a slippery slope. And I say this why? Because a lot of times we have the mechanisms for treatment, whether it's soil air, whether it's a particular type of system, we get the applicable long-term acceptance rate, which is basically looking at a biological map, making sure the surface is there. But most failures occur not because of those systems, they occur because of hydraulics. And now you're starting to get down to the area where you're trying to make and let, from an engineering perspective, yeah, I can make things work hydraulically. I can bring in a lot of fill, I can do whatever, but then you're starting to get into the point of where is your point of concern? Is it 50 feet, 25 feet? Is it 100 feet? What do I need before that breaks out? And it will. And now you're going to end up in situations where, because the way the state looks at it and the way the code's always written, it's got to stay in the ground. Hydraulically, it's got to stay in the ground to the point of concern. And that is usually some sort of discharge sink someplace, wetland, water course, or whatever. But to think that you're going to put, and somebody may end up have a situation where you could have a breakout, even though it's done treated, now it's crossing property lines. How are you going to get into that when you're starting legal battles between property owners? You're going down a very big slippery slope in this whole aspect.
Well, I mean, you can say that it has to stay in the ground. I mean, there's ways to do it. And, at the end of the day, my understanding is we're supposed to look at options that are environmentally protective and help with the cost of housing. I mean, that's the list we're supposed to come up with. Now, there may be things, and I agree with you, Mark. There's certainly sites that people have tried to treat it and they have treated it, but it comes out at the toe of the slope, and who's dealing with it? But if there's a way that we can cover that, I mean, that would be a bullet we could put forward.
No, there's no question there are, but it's very, and I think the public health code comes from, and the reason why it comes from a prescriptive process is the ability that you're talking about a lot of now trained people that have to review this stuff.
Yeah, that's why.
And I'm going to tell you, you can't find a sanitarian now.
He's so right.
Phil Rolls. How are you going to get people to actually
They do it in
it?
other states, all right? I mean, we don't do it here, but we'll cross over to Rhode Island, we'll cross over to Mass, and they're doing it every day.
And maybe that's just working group
I'm
does,
just-
study other states, study best practices.
Yeah, I mean,
you
you do, but do they have the personnel to actually do it? I
Yeah,
mean,
but you're assuming everything's gonna be perfect. And the installer's gonna know what they're doing, the engineer's gonna know what they're doing.
I'm with you. I just want to get,
We need those factors.
I just want to get I want to get a list
Yeah.
that says these are the things that, whether it's we want to look at going forward as a working group, I don't really care. I just don't want to hear it can't be done when other people do it all over. I know we can do it.
We table that for a
So,
future
Do we
discussion.
want to come up with a list of things like that? Is that going to help move this all forward quicker, and want to make that our first bullet?
Like
Is that
future
is that
discussion
fair?
points, basically something to that effect.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then we can, we'll put the interface factors on there, things like that. If we don't want to discuss them, let's say because with that, on the DEP sites, you can run stone, so you can work under parking lots with stone.
So they have a higher level of review there than we have, which again is it eats up time. So you're gonna pay that price. Obviously, it's gonna cost more, and they're regulated thereafter. So someone's theoretically keeping an eye on it after that. So I don't think you want that. I don't think you want, because then you have what they do. You don't want that. You want to have a prescriptive.
No, we want to go on the prescriptive. We all agree that's prescriptive, really the only way we can do
These sensitive sites like that, knowing the limitations we have with personnel, with the people that install it. And listen, I'm an engineer myself. I've seen some engineers that don't do such a good
I
job.
hear you. I've seen.
And I'm very suspect. And if no one's watching them, they're gonna, possibly take advantage just like anybody else would. So those are my concerns. We need these factors. They were in there for factors of safety to understand these issues that happen, like staff and qualifications and.
But it's achieved, we have an opportunity to take a fresh look at it.
Yeah.
It's done in other states.
Sure.
We should just consider it, right? I'm not advocating for
Yeah.
doing it or not. I'm advocating for coming up with the list and considering the pros and the cons. Is there a reasonable way it can be done relative to risk, right? Is there an opportunity to help with housing in the state and manage the risk? That's all I'm asking.
All right.
Dave, can we get, you're speaking specifically to other states. Have we had the opportunity to circulate some of those state regs that may be obviously different than Connecticut, but then address the areas that you're talking about, whether it's Rhode Island or Massachusetts or other states
I don't
that?
know if we haven't done it yet, and maybe that.
I mean, we need to do that. I mean, if we're
It's not-
asking about it, let's figure out what they're doing.
But we probably, I think to focus on, to get the nitrogen, the direct, how do I say, the direct nitrogen effect that we're kind of tasked with.
Mhm.
I would, or else I mean, it's a never ending battle, right? We're never getting through this. So if we
The
can,
scope of this.
if we can keep it, the focus really of us is the nitrogen aspect. I think this has an ancillary effect on it, but if we can stick with the nitrogen.
I could say, so in general, yes, we are in a public health workforce crisis, guys. So, I mean, we talk about a 5-year plan, hopefully gonna happen, gotta beef up the numbers. And local health, and Greg, you can chime in on this, you got our lead dropped down to 5. Elevated blood lead level is gonna come before a new development of a house. So I'm saying is like, yes, we are under constraints and we're not trained as much as we should be trained. You know, and I think that's gonna be a long time. There's no way we can do it.
But if you take an example of Rhode Island, that's
Very,
Yeah.
very.
But
It's like,
let's take Rhode Island. What did Rhode Island do? They have engineers, et cetera, that would do it all. As a matter of fact, they can go out there and inspect most of their stuff. The state might send somebody out. But,
make it bigger.
right, so there's ways to do all this, but you know, I think that's the next step. Let's figure out what we want to do and what makes sense and will help from a development perspective, a cost perspective, and be protective of the health and environment. And then let's figure out how do we, you know,
Well, I think we're all piggybacking off of each other on these groups. So like, I know that our group was the one who's talking a lot about the training, whether it should be there, as well as lack of having those resources. So even if it's not gonna get tackled here, I think it's gonna be starting to looked at in other groups. And maybe at some point, we should just have a combined meeting,
Mhm.
maybe with regulations and
sure.
nitrogen to kind of hammer that out, because it's a huge one. So
Policy and, okay, I'm in that one. I was talking today, policy and resources committee.
awesome.
Yeah.
So do we want to take a quick break before Stu gets into, we'll go through Stu's idea?
Everybody's a fan of that.
Yeah, I need a little bit of downtime first. You want to take 5 minutes, or how about we say 10? Why don't we reconvene at, what would it be, 9:25? Is that good? 5 minutes? What do you guys want?
10 minutes would be great. I gotta get a cup of coffee.
9:25.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Why don't you take one